actually water can even be fire. It can be all of the elements. Where is this consciousness coming from? If perhaps it's not stored within the brain, could it be within the waters of the body?
When the water stops moving within us, which is our blood, life ends, essentially.
What if spirit and water are so intimately intertwined that they actually behave as one, and that spirit could be connected to this kind of vibrational vapor that might just move so fast we can't identify it yet? I have seen that water is fully aware of its surroundings and is reading your information, reading you. It knows all your secrets. It knows everything about you.
Now, before we jump into this episode, if this conversation resonates with you, please like, subscribe, and share this with whoever you feel that needs to hear it. Your support helps us keep bringing this information out into the world and helps us awaken this planet. Thank you. I'd like to welcome to the show Veda Austin. How you doing, Veda?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. You're from New Zealand, so it's a bit of a trip.
A little bit of a trip.
A little bit of a trip, to say the least. Yes. But you're over the hangover, the jet lag. Hangover was from the other night. That's another conversation altogether. I've been a fan of your work, what you're doing, and how you're talking about water, which is something that was so elemental, so basic for so many people. I mean, we can't live without it. But there is a lot of components, spiritual components to water and energetic levels to water and mysteries about H2O that most people don't really understand. And you've gone deep into it. So for my first question is, what made you want to go into water?
Well, it is a good question.
I mean, as a topic of study, you're like, you know what? I need water. I'm going to really dive into water.
Yeah. Well, everything that's happened with my work has been organic. Mm-hmm. So I never kind of made this decision as like, right, I'm going to start studying water and it's going to be my life for the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. I was in a horrendous car accident over 25 years ago. Wow. And we went under a 7-ton truck, rolled twice, and the driver died immediately. And it was considered one of the worst accidents in New Zealand where someone survived. And over the course of 20-odd years, I had 8 surgeries, mostly for bowel resections because the seatbelt crushed my collarbone and stomach, and I had various issues from that. And what happened was that on my last surgery, I went in for another bowel resection, and I woke up surrounded by doctors saying, well, you didn't recover well, and now you have showers of blood clots in your lungs, and you're probably going to have to be on warfarin for the rest of your life, which is a blood thinner. So I'm like, what the heck? And so I took warfarin for a few months because they said I was going to die if I didn't. Mm-hmm. When I had a clean chest x-ray, I made a decision for myself that I'm not saying anyone else should do. That was my decision based off something that had already happened. So I made a decision to go on my own natural healing journey. And I based it on the fact that 3 doctors had told me that I would never be able to have children based off the car accident issues. And I had already had a child for every doctor that told me I couldn't. Obviously not out of defiance, but I have an ability to put what someone tells me on the shelf, and especially about my body, and let my body make that decision. And so that was a very helpful piece for me. And so I went and I saw a friend who was a medical doctor but also practiced Ayurvedic medicine, and he said to me, why don't you start with the foundation of life, just like you were saying, this seemingly basic thing. Mm-hmm. And he said, why don't you find with a naturally alkaline water, because most springs are naturally alkaline, anything above a 7 in pH, which stands for power or potential of hydrogen, as I'm sure most people know. And I really liked that idea because it seemed super basic.
Right.
And I like simple. I don't like things that are all too complicated. And so I started trialing myself on 2-week trials with naturally alkaline water from different springs. And we have lots of springs in New Zealand we can collect from. And after all of this time, I'd actually had a wellness centre. And so a friend came and said, well, what? I know this old guy, he's got his own private source of water. It's 9.9 in pH out of the ground, which was one of the highest I'd ever heard of. And he was only giving it to cancer patients. And they were having amazing success. And I'm like, wow, well, I'd love to see if he'll give me some. So I went and I told him my story, and he gave me a month's worth of water to drink. Day 3, I noticed a huge change in something so many people don't like talking about, but that is bowel motions. So many people are sitting on the toilet trying to push out a pebble for like an hour, and that is one indicator of the many indicators of dehydration. And so I'm after bowel surgery and things are kind of moving along. I'm thinking, okay, this is a good sign. But on day 10, something really, really was starting to go on. I had all these bumps coming up on my right arm and right jaw that were really painful. And I'm like, I know my body is purging, but like, what is coming out? Because it feels like there's sharp things in there. And as disgusting as it might sound, I ended up getting some tweezers and I pulled out this little shard of green glass. Between day 10 and 12, I'd picked 27 pieces of green glass out of my arm and jaw that had been embedded in my body for over 20 years. Because the man who died in the car, he owned a nightclub, and in the back of the car were crates of Steinlager beer, which is a lager in green glass. Yeah. And when the car rolled, my right side got more green glass and my left side got more windscreen. And the nurses had spent over 3 days picking all the glass out of my body, and I thought they'd got most of it. But they didn't. Wow. And so my go-to question was, well, how can just drinking this water, given that I was not changing anything in my diet, skincare, any of those things for these trials I was on and put myself on purposefully, I was like, how can water purge me like this? And so I went straight to an analysis, which would be the most logical thing to do, like what's in the water. And there's high bicarb, which is what makes it naturally alkaline. So if you have like a glass of tap water, for example, and maybe its pH is 6.9 or something, and you add half a teaspoon of baking soda to it, you'll bring its pH up to about an 8 or 8.3, which is around about the pH of baking soda. So it's a very potent. So when you get it naturally filtered through the water and it picks up all of the minerals and things on its way, that's one of the ways you get naturally alkaline water, which is very stable. So we've been able to test that water over a period of many, many years, and its pH has barely dropped, which is extraordinary. So I'm looking at this, and yes, it has silica, it has this and the other, but all the while I'm thinking, I feel like I'm missing something. And then it was like, well, all I'm really doing when you look at an analysis is reading what's in the water, what water holds. But, well, what is water? And I started asking that question on top of how was I purged. When you ask a scientist or a teacher or pretty much most anyone what is water, they'll tell you it's H2O, two hydrogens and an oxygen. And I don't know about you, but I mean, I have children, and one of them once said to me, Mum, what's water? And I was really mindful not to say H2O because I've seen so many children glaze over and just go, oh, that doesn't really mean anything to me. And many adults are the same. It's like, I want to know this thing that we are made up of. By molecular count, we're 99% water. And there are more water molecules in our bodies than all the stars in the perceivable universe. And yet, when we ask this question, what is water, we just hear this answer so often of H2O. And so I was inquiring more, and someone said, yeah, but what if the two hydrogens are feminine in the mode of levity, and the large oxygen is masculine in the mode of gravity, and together they create liquid water and balance on Earth? And I'm like, well, that means something more to me. But the key piece for me was when I found out that water is actually only one part matter, the two hydrogens and oxygen, and the rest is photonic light, meaning that water is a lighthouse. And with all the trillions of water molecules in your body, that's really emitting light. So you are a lighthouse. And when I was trying to understand how the glass was purged, there were two ways I looked at it. And one was that I think people have their own song playing based off all the different frequencies within the body. And it was as if I had a new player in my orchestra, like an opera singer who can sing such a high note that it shattered the glass. But the more scientific answer could be, and yet we're still looking, trying to discover how it did this, was that we've had that water tested, and it does have fourth phase water within it. So we have a liquid, solid, gas, and then a type of gel or plasma. And fourth phase water acts like a battery. So when you are looking for it in a laboratory, you get some water. You put something called microspheres inside it that allow you to see any movement. Then you put a Naphion tube, which is like this little see-through tube, and then you look down the microscope. If there is fourth phase water within water, you will see that the water that's fourth phase self-propels through the tube over and over again with no assistance. And the way that it can do that is that when you have a Naphion tube, it is hydrophilic, so it is water-loving. And your cells are hydrophilic. And fourth phase water can build on it, so the water, this part of it will push all the solates, all the things that are inside of it, outside of itself, and create a negative charge. It absorbs more light, it has a more molecular structure, or it's more lattice-like order, and it is negatively charged, which is an important piece, and then it pushes everything out, which becomes positively charged. So then you have a negative and a positive, which creates a battery. And so that's kind of the battery of your cells. So with having glass, which is hydrophilic or water-loving, in my body, and with this fourth phase water being introduced, it could well be that it starts to build an exclusion zone, which starts to push the glass out of my arm.
Wow, that's amazing. There was a story I heard about a man who invented a engine who can run on water, and it was working. Then apparently he died mysteriously. But is that something you've heard of? That because when you were saying all that, I'm like, well, that's just physics now, and all of a sudden you can run an engine off of it as a fuel source. Could you imagine if all of our cars ran on water instead of, fossil fuels that are polluting?
I think many people have imagined it and created it, and so it's just not been introduced for whatever seemingly odd reason. But actually, there's this one very interesting piece where there was a doctor who was looking for a cure for cancer, and he ended up getting a test tube of salt water, of saturated salt water, and he was able to put a kind of microwave energy onto it, and rather than actually a really unique thing happened where a flame that didn't look like a flame exactly, it looked a bit like lightning, but it was flame-like, appeared on top of the water source. So it was water became fire, and it actually looks just like lightning. And so he was hoping to introduce that as another free energy source to use even with seawater, for example. But, I never heard anything more about him either.
Right.
Hopefully he's doing good.
Hopefully he's around still. But there's a lot of powers that be that don't want free energy.
Well, I think that things are changing.
Very much
things
so.
will change, and that's. I think that's hopefully something we'll say one day as a past tense. The powers that be didn't want this to happen, but look at where we are now.
There was a very famous documentary about the power of water and the emotion that you gave it, like you yelling at it or playing thrash metal versus playing Mozart, and the images that under a microscope, the images that were being created by water. It was a Japanese scientist, if I'm not mistaken. Very famous study that he did. When I saw that documentary, I was in awe of it because it was so powerful. Not only just music, vibrations, but the words. You put the word love on a bottle of water and you put the word hate on a bottle of water. Those two energy, I guess the energies of the words themselves, the intention of the person, I guess it has to be the intention of the person who's putting them on, that kind of charges them with the energy, because a letter by itself doesn't really have any power other than unless you give it the energy. But can you kind of dive into what that was? Because I know you do a lot of work with what you see in water on a molecular level, and it's beautiful.
Yeah, I'd love to, because it's one of my favorite topics, to be honest. Essentially, from my accident led me into asking this question about water and hearing about water memory, and hearing this term water memory, and reading Masaru Emoto's book Messages in Water, and learning about other people doing similar things, and became curious if this was even real. Because I think if you can discover something for yourself, then that's a whole different thing than just reading about it. And what Emoto was essentially doing was, there was a lot of contrast. So you've just described a lot of very contrasting things. And I have found people are really addicted to very contrasting things, the best and the worst of things.
The duality.
People seem to really remember. I think there's a lot of things in between that are also really important to look at, and that's been part of a lot of my work.
Right.
Because I would love to share something that my son experienced after looking at Emoto's book. And this is nothing against Emoto, because what he did was open the door for people to see themselves as bodies of water sensitive to thoughts and sounds, environment, music, frequency, and all these kinds of things. And he made my work so much more embraced, because he had really led the way for that. Yeah. Even though he wasn't embraced by the scientific community, he was embraced by so many, and his work was very important. And words do have a power. And so I have been working with words almost as my Rosetta Stone, words not just in English, but in the same word in multiple languages, to see what would happen. Right. And what I have found is that there is, with using specific words and repeating the study over and over periods of time, using the same word and the same freezing process. So I don't use a microscope like Emoto did. I don't use a flash freezer like he did either. I work with a regular freezer. I freeze water for about 5 minutes and 30 seconds until there's liquid on top and ice underneath. I tip the liquid away and I photograph on my iPhone the photos that you see. So now thousands of people around the world that I've taught are doing this. But with words, this is important. So I'll write a word, put my dish on top of it for 30 seconds, which is my protocol. It's not too long, it's not too short. What is more interested in your attention span and what you're focused on than the length of time it's in there. Okay. Then freeze using my method and then take the photograph. And if I see the same symbol appear at least 50 times in a row using the same word influence, then I say I have one hydroglyph. And I can see the same symbol for some words that interrelate. And I have 48, and I've been doing this over 6 years. And it's a very long process, as you can imagine. But when my son saw and read Emoto's book, he came to me and he said, "Mum, I think water hates me." I'm like, "What? What do you mean?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "Look, water only likes John Lennon and classical music, and it hates heavy metal." And I'm like, "Oh, honey, I didn't know that you liked heavy metal." And he said, I don't, but I like Tupac, and Tupac swears, and it says here that water doesn't like swearing either." And I said, "If you don't take anything else but what I'm about to say away, then we're doing good." I said, water is not in judgment.
Right.
It is so not in judgment. That is one of the things that is so helpful. And I find it that with my children specifically, if they can't identify with the best or worst, sometimes they assume the worst like he did. And so I said to him, "Honey, let's just go through and start with Tupac and go through lots of genres of music to see what water will do." And I said, "I'm pretty sure whoever did the heavy metal probably hated it." Mm-hmm. Because like you rightly said, it's all about that intention, that feeling that comes up for us. Water's more interested in what we're feeling than what we're thinking.
Right.
I have seen that over again. For example, if I'm doing some stuff, putting flowers in water, will it design the image of the flower? But if I'm genuinely sad, water doesn't give a toss about the flower image. It will show me sad faces all day long. It is not just it's not a machine. Water is wild, and it is in relationship with us. If we allow that relationship to nurture, you will be amazed at what you would see. And so with my son, we started with a song called All Eyes on Me by Tupac that he was really into at the
great
time.
Song.
And there was this big eye in the ice. And then we went on and on and on, and now I have this huge music section in my latest book because I wanted it to be for children too, things that they can relate to, and people who like music that I do. Does that mean that they're a bad person? Of course it doesn't. You can like heavy metal and be a good person.
Oh, absolutely.
You can, but when you are always looking at the two extremes, there is this is bad and this is good kind of a thing. Whereas I see that water is not in that place so much. We are basing those things off personal feeling.
And programming.
And I think it's nice to start kind of venturing out into a little bit of the unknown places where, for example, with a few of the songs, and there are lots of genres. I did one with Taylor Swift's song "We Are Never Getting Back Together," and I saw the letters EX, like X,
X like an X.
And with the bane of most parents' lives, there's this earworm song called Baby Shark. And
Stop it. Don't you do it.
I'm not going to
Don't do it, please.
This big shark in the eyes with this big open mouth. And
so it was creating the pictures based on the intention of the song.
It was picking up on words from the song. And that was interesting. So hydroglyphs for me began when I started repeating some songs, particularly Stairway to Heaven. And with Stairway to Heaven, it's really easy to repeat a song and do it because it's the exact same song. You push play, you leave the room, because I don't want to be involved in any feeling about the song, come back and then freeze immediately. But each time I would do it, I saw this stairway image that looked like a ladder. And after a while of seeing this, I'm wondering, I wonder if that actually means stairway relative to the song. And so I wrote the word stairway down on a piece of paper. I did the process and I saw this stairway. And well, that's pretty cool. I wonder if it would do it again. And so over the course of 3 months, I did it 50 times. 50 just wasn't random in my mind. And I thought, if it does it that many times, then maybe I can start trying something new or another word or extending this. And after seeing it repeat and repeat and repeat, I'm like, you know what? I actually think this could be a symbol for this energy of this word stairway. Now, I'm not telling you that water's reading words, but it's more likely picking up on the energy of a word and reverse engineering it back to some kind of living principle that is encoded with the information of the essence of that word. So it is informed. So it is informed with the information. It has gone into form from the information, because the way that water freezes is very unique when you're freezing it at this stage. It's a liquid crystal. It's actually not even a solid, which we can get into later. But so I thought, well, what do you do with a stairway? So I used the words climb up, and I saw the same symbol. When I used the words climb down, I didn't see it. And when I reversed that song, because everyone said, oh, you have to reverse it because it's some demon song or something. And, okay, but I saw nothing because it wasn't coherent. And that led on to other songs, like Beyonce's song, Single Ladies, and the tagline is, if you like it, then you should have put a ring on it.
Right.
And it's kind of alluding to marriage. And I had seen already with a wedding invitation water design this ring shape. And so when I played that song, I saw repeated patterns of rings. And so I'm like, well, does it mean marriage? Does it mean ring? And it continued on like this until I discovered that actually there's something to this. And I was very vigorous in the way in which I approached it. And I'm now blown away because, you can work with words, literally like a Rosetta Stone, to start to see what these symbols are. And it's like an energetic imprint of the energy of that word. And in our world, where did the words even originate from? And then there's this vibration, and even if you kind of even looked biblically, and the Spirit of God hovered over the waters, and then there's sound and the word and all of these things as they play this role, as in also in many indigenous cultures, some similar creation stories around water, sound, and light. And light is such an important piece, because I don't think you can study water without studying light.
Of course, yeah. The spectrums.
Well, especially given that it is a container of light.
Right.
And I had a First Nations Indigenous woman tell me that she could speak to bees. And I am going somewhere with this. And she said that she would watch their hives for really long periods of time, until one day a bee came out and communicated somehow to her and said, "We don't mind you looking at our hive, but could you please not look at it for such a long time, because your conscious expression is putting too much light in our hive and we prefer it to be darker."
Wow.
So I'm like, so where we put our attention is where we put our light. And that answered, in a way, a question that I had had on a very practical level. Because at the perfect time, bearing in mind I have been working prolifically in this field for 14 years, and I have over 64,000 photos of water responding in what can really only be deemed as an intelligent way. Water is acting like an intelligent designer, and we can talk a little more about what that means or what that might look like, and my first photo and my discoveries later, if you like. But at this point, if I open the freezer at the perfect time, I have seen, filmed, and photographed light like a halo coming out of the ice just as it's beginning to form. And I think it is actually light that is paving the way for the design of this imagery. And it is very likely light from our conscious expression that is being absorbed by the water. And as it's given a conducive environment, which is freezing, to freeze into the form of the information it received through light, it is light that paves the way for the revealing of that information.
Can I ask you a question? Because when you were saying that that water was kind of almost translating the words for you and symbols for you, have you ever tried taking hieroglyphics and putting it to water to see if it actually created an image that you would understand, like stairway? So let's say we're looking at an ancient language that's extinct and we don't have a Rosetta Stone for it, and we're trying to figure it out, like in the Mayans and all that kind of stuff. Could you take a symbol, put it in water, and see if it comes up with, oh, that means stair, or that means, have you tried that?
Actually, that's what I'm in the process of doing.
Okay.
It's what's fascinating, and it's been a big focus of mine in the last year and a half. There is one symbol, but it's very complex. I call it the information glyph, only because it showed up for the word information, and I have it as a hydroglyph. But I've been teaching this very simple technique that I have for thousands and thousands of people. And about 7 to 8 out of 10 people, of all of these people, in the last year and a half, have seen the same symbol appear. And what's so interesting about it is that it looks just like ancient language. And when I I've only worked with AI for 3 days until I realized it really, really wasn't for me. But it gave me one helpful thing where it took the background noise or the background out of this so I could see the symbols very clearly. Why I did that was because I was speaking at the annual water conference last year in Lisbon. And
there's a water conference?
There is a water conference, yes, it is. And I highly recommend it. It's been going for a lot of years, actually, hosted by Dr. Jerry Pollack.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And so, anyway, I was told to mostly focus only on repeatability because it was a scientific conference.
Of course.
So I just showed 64 examples of each one and what they look like in the dish and the process and all of this. But when I got to the information hydroglyph, I'm like, I can't leave this bit out. So I just gave a comparison to how much they look like hieroglyphs and cuneiform in ancient language. And there was a scientist there that took a screenshot of it and put it into ChatGPT and said, can you show me the ancient languages here? And it didn't only identify the comparisons I had it to. It identified hieroglyphs and cuneiform within my ancient, information glyph.
Wow.
So within the ice, it picked up on some hieroglyphs that were there. And that really inspired me to go to AI and see what it could do for me. But I really had to stop that because I'm far more interested in biological intelligence than artificial intelligence. Mm-hmm. And I'll throw something out as well whilst I remember it, is around clouds. So I spoke to another Indigenous woman, and she said that for her, she believes that clouds store memories. And that as human beings, we have this incredible fluid intelligence within our body that we often don't even really think about. And sometimes we have these inspired thoughts and they just kind of come out of us, we throw them out. But she thinks that the iCloud came from the fact that we know that these clouds store memories, and so we actually created this because of that.
The cloud. We literally created the cloud.
We created the cloud. And when you have a cartoon and those bubbles and then there's like a little cloud, it's thoughts.
Right.
So,
but it was a cloud. I never thought of that. That's amazing.
Yeah. So when you start funneling things through the lens of water, you'd be amazed at how much sense things start to make. And that's one of the things I have been doing. And the ancient language thing is really interesting because I'm going to Egypt in November. And I'm going to be working with water in the pyramids, water and hieroglyphs, and I think the ancient worlds understood about water in an entirely different way. And I would love to be able to take languages that have been undeciphered and start working with water and seeing what is revealed. And I do actually think we'll be able to get some answers. I've been working a little bit anyway. There's many things I work in the field of, but with genuine crop circles. And of the two that I have been working with, I've seen this same symbol, and there is one symbol that I have seen on crop circles in ancient sites, and I've been working with a beautiful astrologer called Pam Gregory, and very mindfully doing it with every single day doing crystallography with water that's been outside. And I'm working with the same water each time. And over long, long periods of time, I'm still doing it. And we see just before a full moon, there is a change in the signature pattern of water. So rain, for example, and that's what I've been working with in New Zealand, has a very specific signature pattern that looks kind of like a grassy fan pattern.
Rainwater, just straight rainwater.
Rainwater collected from, we have collected rainwater. And we have very clear skies where I live in very rural area of New Zealand. So we have this signature pattern. So I'm able to see each day it has the same signature pattern. Just before a full moon, things change. And there is this kind of opening that looks a bit like a rounded shaped half moon, or it's hard to explain, like a smiley face, I guess, without the face, just the mouth. And it's like this opening that happens. And then during the full moon, we get this kind of large, ovalish kind of shape appear. And then a day after that or 2 days after that, there's this transition phase, and then it goes back to grass, grass, grass. When there's a new moon, we get a very specific symbol each time. And it's the same symbol that we see in ancient sites and crop circles and all of these other things. And that is the conception hydroglyph, which is two circles that touch. And often there is another circle separate, which is complete conception when you read them, because one circle on its own is complete. And so why would it be that the ancient world, including these crop circles, are very, very much talking about conception and also in the new moon. So there is something to be learned from this. I mean, I feel like the woman from the movie Arrival. and for anyone that doesn't know about that movie,
sure.
I mean, just give
Amy Adams,
give it a Google.
Yeah.
But essentially, she's working with these kind of aliens, and that's the other interesting piece. There is so much watery, cloudy of stuff.
Yeah.
It's like everything's in the vapor.
Yes.
Right? And so these creatures, these kind of aliens that look a bit like octopus, they kind of put out of their little hand things.
Almost ink.
Like ink, which kind of floats like smoke. And so she's trying to understand their language of symbols. And what was also interesting was that these pods, these alien pods, put themselves in different countries. And for them to understand the entire message, the countries actually ended up having to work together. And what I'm seeing, because I can't do this myself, which is why I share my process so easily, is that if it wasn't for the people around the world that are actually doing this and helping me discover hydroglyphs and understand more around what they're seeing and what studies they're doing using my process, I wouldn't have got anywhere near as far as I have. And I think that this is something that is the work of water. I don't take much credit for it because water has been guiding me all this way, which might sound a bit woo-woo to some people. I'm perfectly fine with that. But from the car accident and healing with water to asking, what is holy water, to questioning this idea of water storing memory, because a classical scientist would poo-poo that whole thing. Water can't store memory because it's hydrogen and oxygen. The hydrogens are breaking so rapidly. Water is in molecular chaos. How could it even pay attention to anything? But if you asked a quantum physicist the same question, they would say, well, there's a difference between molecular chaos and molecular excitement. When you are excited about something, there is a reason for it. And when something is excited, it is also much more in one space.
Have you tried, this is just because it's in the news right now, holy water. Have you ever tested holy water? Something that has been blessed by a priest?
Yes, multiple different types.
Okay.
Even Zamzam water from Mecca as well.
Yeah.
What was interesting about that was how long it took to freeze. Water that has salt in it, like salt seawater, for example, would usually take longer to freeze.
Sure.
But wouldn't normally go over the 12-minute mark. The Zamzam water, which is not seawater, took something like 23.3 minutes to freeze to the level
to begin
that I'm freezing it at, which is not even a solid.
Right.
So, and the imagery, it looked like a flower, it looked like a rose. It looked like a rose.
Why do you think that?
I think that there is some spiritual connection that within Islam that the rose has with this water and within their belief system. So I had a lot of people, Muslim people, reach out and understand that was very symbolic for them when they saw that imagery.
And you also did one with a Catholic priest, or?
Yes, I have done water from baptismal water.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and that showed varied things because I've done a few. One was that it really kind of showed. One was like a little cross. I've had two with little crosses, and one which looked like actually a young person praying, which was quite a complex picture.
Yeah. And
then sometimes I see with other places from holy water, I've seen another rose from a Catholic, what is it called?
Holy water?
Yeah, the holy water.
Yeah.
The rose theme seems to come up. I'd love to get some water from the Ganges. That's high on my list.
Oh, God, I can imagine.
Yeah. And I've had blessed water. With a lot of people that bless their water, pray over the water, I see what I call water's energetic state of health show up. So you can identify a quality, and it's a bigger word than that, but the qualitative aspect of a water with high energy and good energy is the hexagon. So the bigger the hexagon, the higher the qualitative aspects of the water are. And I call it a star fern hexagon because that's what it looks like. It looks like a six-pointed star with ferns off each leg, which creates a hexagonal pattern. And I've collected some beautiful water that I personally considered to be a holy water, holy because of its purity and how nature has blessed it, and that it's come up high into a little cave at this very sacred place of mine in New Zealand. And the hexagon took up the entire dish. So when you see an entire hexagon within the glass petri dishes that I'm working with, which are the same size as my hand, of 10 centimetres in diameter, you know that there's something very, very special there. But then you could go into, well, what about municipal tap water, which has naturally got a lot of disorder? You know,
and chemicals too sometimes.
Yeah, and that's an important piece I'm glad you brought up, is that what am I working with? Because what I can see, and I've done so many studies in this area, is when you work with municipal tap water and you do the crystallography and then you let that melt, and I've done controls with this. So when you let, say, both of them melt, your control and the other one, and you let them both melt, and you don't do anything to the control one, you just leave it alone, and then you hold one to your heart in a loving, intentional way for 1 minute only, and then you refreeze them all at the same time, what you see is that the one that was given love has started to change structures to become more like a giant fern or like flowers. So it's changed structurally but not chemically. So what we're seeing is something very akin to a human emotion. It's like water is feeling better. And I've often wondered, what if water is really emotion that we can see, and we've never even considered that? And there's this lovely thing that I've heard, because I've done freezing of tears as well, different types of tears, chemical tears, which is where you cut an onion and you just can't help but cry, and then emotional tears from joy and sadness and laughter. And what's fascinating to me is that the tears of the chemical tears, it designed something that looks like my iris, but it kind of also looks a bit like an onion, I guess. And then the other one were all variations of the hexagon, even grief. The difference between the hexagons of grief, where they're emanating hexagons, so they kind of come up, there were multiple of them, but they were quite spaced out. Whereas tears of relief were very complex, like a very complex spider web, for example, kind of with those compacted hexagons all emanating out, whereas laughter held all the light. There was a lot of light in it, which would bring me to where I've seen a lot of light in one particular type of imagery. I have a friend who was pregnant, and I said, could you please drink some water whilst thinking of your baby, and then leave me some and I'll freeze that leftover water. And when she did that, she closed her eyes, she drank the water, and she put her hand on her belly. And when I froze the water using my method, we actually saw this incredibly clear baby or fetus in the eyes. Its entire head and spine were covered in light, were made of light. And I think that was very indicative of the cerebral spinal fluid.
Yeah, I wanted to get into that.
Yeah, but what was even more interesting was that below the baby in the ice was an image of a hand, a light, that was in light, a light hand. So you were seeing things from two perspectives. You were seeing the mother's imagination of feeling and imagining her baby, but you could very well say that we were also seeing the baby's perspective of the energetic of his or her mother's hand. And so that led me into cerebral spinal fluid as well, and like the light of water. And I have a friend called Dr. Mauro Zapatera. He is a Harvard doctor specializing in the CFS, and he is saying that cerebral spinal fluid is the portal to cosmic consciousness. It is 99% water, and the first cerebral spinal fluid you ever get came from amniotic fluid. And I've also always thought that amniotic fluid hosts and holds ancestral information. And when I well, where I want to go with him anyway, is that recently he started sharing something that I've known about for years that most people have never heard of and may have never even believed possible, but it is absolutely true. So he posted about a French man who had had a perfectly normal life, everything perfectly normal. And he had been in a car accident, and when they scanned his brain, they realized, oh, this man has only got 10% of a brain in his head, and the rest is filled with cerebral spinal fluid. But yet he's been perfectly intelligent, normal, healthy, walking around and having a job, but had no signs of there being any problem, and they didn't know that he had only 10% of a brain until he had a scan. And so there was another example of a 19-year-old girl, excelled through school from California, and sadly she was also in a car accident, had a brain scan, found she only had a brain stem. So if you have an attachment to the idea that consciousness is stored in the brain only, then that kind of throws that out a little bit. But there was a doctor, I think he was from Amsterdam, and Dr. Luber or something, I can't quite remember his last name, who his whole study for many years was working with people who had little to no brain. And half of them, he said, were severely disabled. But the other half, they were the half that had the least amount of brain and had extremely high intelligence. And he said he saw more miracles walk into his office than all the miracles in the Bible. So this kind of then comes to this question of where is this intelligence coming from? Where is this consciousness coming from? If perhaps it's not stored within the brain, could it be within the waters of the body? And in old times, water wasn't even called water. In old England, water was called the waters because it was considered to be a holy body of water, sacred. And when Romans brought plumbing into creation, people started to see their waste getting taken away by the waters, and the waters became water. And now we've reduced it even further to H2O. But in the English language, where outside of biblically, the waters or waters is still used to remind us of water can be sacred, is when we say her waters broke. Because, of course, amniotic fluid is a sacred body of water. And so there is these little reminders here and there.
It's absolutely fascinating. There's like so many rabbit holes I can go down.
Yes. Gone down a few myself.
It's so many rabbit holes we can go down. I want to dive into the spiritual aspect of it because you were talking about that consciousness resides almost in the amniotic fluid, the spinal fluid, which brings me to the idea of the chakra system and the Kundalini awakening, which is, have you had any experience or any understanding of how a Kundalini awakening or your opening of the chakras to find enlightenment, to become a walking master, how water plays with that?
You can't take water out of that equation. Water is that equation. It is water and light. There is not only one state of water.
Right.
And I think sometimes we limit our idea of water, even limit it to the elements, because we say water is just one of the elements. No, actually water can even be fire. It can be all of the elements. So I already mentioned the doctor that found out that he could make water burn in this kind of like electrical way. Well, there's a man called Jonathan Butts who sadly passed last year, but he was working with phaser, which is like a flame and a laser, where essentially they found that water vapor can burn at 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit and it's implosion, so you can get close to it and it's actually cold. And so when we're talking about even hydrogen, like you look at the sun, for example, hydro and gen is Genesis and hydro, water is the creator of water. So you could actually look at the sun and think it's hydrogen. But where there is this relationship, there's actually water in the sun. And water is, hydrogen is like seeding the entire universe. There is water in places we couldn't even imagine. There's water all around us, but we don't think about it. The fact that we breathe out means there's water in the air.
Correct.
And we don't even think about that. And
humidity, the humidity in the air.
And so you kind of have to kind of start, well, you don't have to do anything. I definitely don't want people to think they have to do anything. But you can start being curious about these other states of water, perhaps. And we've heard of a liquid, solid, gas, and type of, gel or plasma, and there's the ether, which also could come into this idea of some watery element of some kind. But what we know about water is literally just a drop in the ocean, which means that's all we actually know about ourselves. And so with Kundalini, with what Mauro was talking about too, is that he has been able to prove that the spinal fluid moves with your deep breaths. You can actually push it upward, and it's bathing the brain. And at nighttime, when we are washing away the day, the cerebral spinal fluid moves like waves coming into a beach and coming back and forth, and actually behaves like an ocean in many ways. And I've had an experience, I suppose, in my own. It wasn't an intentional Kundalini experience, and sometimes I think that happens for people. When I was 14, I don't get angry often. Anyone that knows me says I'm one of the most patient people you'll ever meet. So I remember this because of what happened. I had found out that someone I knew had stolen something from my mum. It was really wild. I was wild. That person came to the door and something took over me. And it was this feeling. I could feel it at the very base of my spine, and it flew up my spine, and it was like fire. It was this fire feeling, and I never forgot it because I could feel movement coming up my spine and sensations that I had never experienced before. And then I just about passed out because everything went bright white. Mm-hmm. I understood in my very young time that something big had happened to me in that experience at that time. And over these many, many years now, I've come to understand that it doesn't have to happen there like that, and for that reason. But being able to work with the waters in your body, and especially the cerebral spinal fluid, which has so much connection to not only, I don't think it's limited to this world. Where do we dream in? Where does consciousness actually come from? Are we tapping into the greater consciousness when we have inspired thought? Where does that come from? And so I think it's like the world we swim in within, but we don't really think about it, because when you ask the question, who am I? Where is this I? Who is having the thought? Is it that thoughts are really clouds, just like we thought we were just talking about earlier, but actually we're the sky and we can watch the clouds and be the observer? And I think one of the most spiritual aspects of water that I've discovered so far, and I'm very much in the process of still discovering, I really don't think I know that much, is water as an observer or a witness. And I say that for multiple reasons. So I've interviewed many people that have had near-death experiences. Many people also who have had the ability to see spirit leave at the time of death. The people that say they can see it leave, they describe it, the spirit,
the vapor,
like a cloud, like mist.
Right.
And the people that have had near-death experiences, not all of them say this, but many do, they have a sense of rising, which is what a gas does. And then they look down upon their body with no attachment to it, and they have become the observer. And so could it be, and I say could because there's lots of things I don't know and I'm still discovering, but we're starting to really get somewhere with some of this, because I believe technology will evolve to be able to even see this, is that what if spirit and water are so intimately intertwined that they actually behave as one, and that spirit could be connected to this kind of vibrational vapor that might just move so fast we can't identify it yet, and that as a gas expands it cools, which is also why people might feel spirit as cold, and then they become the observer with no attachment, and then might move on for a review of the life and carry on for other experiences. But in that in that moment, it could be that water is the carrier of consciousness. A friend of mine says that, his name's Moses Hackman, that water is the glove on the hand of consciousness. There's many questions that come up. I've heard people quote me wrongly saying, oh, she says that water is conscious. I try very hard to say what I have observed and seen myself. Mm-hmm. But I think that it is leading into that water and consciousness are just so intimately entwined that they do behave as one. How you know and say this 100%, I think I'd be saying, I think this, but I don't know this. However, I think logically it makes the most sense when you start thinking, if you believe that we have a spirit and a soul and that soul can leave the body upon death, then the most likely logical way that I can say is that it would be through a state of water. Because, of course, water evaporates and the salts and minerals and everything else, because if you pardon the pun, you boil us down, we're salts, waters, minerals and consciousness. So what if the water and consciousness leave through a process of some kind of evaporation, but perhaps it's a state of water we don't know yet, a type of gas we're still figuring out. But these salts and minerals are left behind. And so when you look at a very special word, so my father is native New Zealand Maori, and there is a very special word for spirit in Maori, which is wairua. Wai is water and rua is two. And there's all kinds of much, much deeper meanings. And what I'm saying is super fundamental right now. But if you look at the two waters, the spiritual and physical waters. So what are the spiritual waters? And like I said, I think one of those that makes sense to me is as an observer, because you look at the dream time. You look at anyone who's had an out-of-body experience. Look at the times where people might have had psychedelic experiences and become an observer of themselves and of the world. Mm-hmm. And well, how is that possible? If we are able to be in one place here and then we're observing that, how is that possible? I think the most sense is that it's water in a state connected with spirit that is simply in a state we're still yet to discover.
I've also spoken to a tremendous amount of near-death experiencers on the show before. It's very interesting that the moment we die is when water stops in us, meaning the heart stops pumping, so water becomes stagnant.
I would love to talk on that
a
little further.
Yeah, so it seems like it's stagnant, and even with I have cats at home, and if you left the water bowl out too long, they just won't drink it because that water is fascinating. Nature's doing that. They won't drink it because it's still water. Still water doesn't have the life and so on. So we got them a little fountain that just recycles the water. Yeah. And they drink water all the time because it's water moving. So can you kind of dive into that idea of when the water stops moving within us, which is our blood, mm-hmm. life ends essentially. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Technically, yes. There's this other little piece to that, I would say, is that some of the people that I've interviewed have came back to life hours later.
Correct.
So how is that possible?
Right.
And so I'd like to add a little bit in there, is that the waters in the body doesn't just immediately stop moving mm-hmm. Upon death. And there's even noted brain function for up to 10 to 15 minutes.
Sure. There's still movement. There's still stuff going on, yeah.
And I think that the connector, like the silver thread, if you will.
Yes, the silver thread.
Is electrical charge. And so Dr. Jerry Pollack was on one of my webinars a couple of years ago, and he talked about something I found fascinating. One of his people that he works with, they were studying easy water, which is that exclusion zone water, the water that builds negative charge and positive charge and acts like a battery, that fourth phase water. And they were curious about this, what happens to this exclusion zone water at death. And so they worked with a chicken as it was starting to develop before it had become fully a chicken. Mm-hmm. I don't really like all that, but anyway, this is what I'm sharing that they did. So they got it so that the heart was beating and all of the areas were starting to develop. And then they stopped the heartbeat, and they were able to specifically look at all the other vital signs, including exclusion zone, that special water in the cells. The vital signs dropped, of course, but the exclusion zone was very slow to drop, and it was still moving. When they introduced infrared light to it, it shot all the way back up and took hours to come back. Now, when you look at how we resuscitate many people, not all, but certainly some, you use those, electrical paddles to try to make the heart.
And you do compressions. Yeah, of course, yeah.
You do all of these things to try to get things moving again, literally.
Shock the heart almost.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, then I start to wonder, if these waters, can actually take a long time to stop moving. If there's any movement, we're not distilled water, we're an ocean, so there is water and salt. If there is any water with salt in it moving at all through the body, even hours later, there is small amount of charge. If charge is the silver thread of the spirit, then that would be one way that someone who has died for a long time can come back in.
Fall right back into the body.
Yeah.
Start it up again, if you will, because it hasn't really...
It's not completely gone. But once it's gone, then everything, the whole rest of the rigor mortis sets in, everything's starting to change.
Sure.
I think that could be one way to look at the practicalities of how that's possible.
Have you done any investigations on, and now we're going to go a little woo here. I think you'll like this, because water is a conduit to information, to a greater consciousness. Have you done any research that allows the other side to communicate with us through water? Mm-hmm. Signs, or, because I've had a lot of mediums on the show, psychics and channelers and so far. So the way they speak to us, it's a million different ways that they can come to us, dreams and so on. But I've never thought about water as an aspect of communication, because it sounds like it's very logical. If we go down the road that we've been talking about, well, then that energy on the other side could arguably communicate in a symbolic way, because that's generally how the other side communicates through mediums, is through symbols, through pictures, through images, because they're not talking. Not all the time. Sometimes they do, but generally speaking, it's images that come into people's heads that they have to kind of interpret to send the message. Have you done any research like that?
Of course.
Ooh, let's dive into that. How'd that work?
Well, my mum, she was my best friend. Mm-hmm. And she died in 1999 of cancer.
Sorry.
And she and I had like a lifetime of memories together. She really was an angel that walked on this earth. And I was missing her. And after seeing water designed so intelligently for so long, what I said is, do you think that my mum could connect to me through you, through the waters? Can you connect to my mum,
And who are you talking to? Or are you just talking
water.
You're just talking to the water. Yeah.
I mean, I know that can sound pretty out there for some people, but
we're talking about the other side communicating through water. I think we're going to take a leap here.
I think we're going to. But, also, I've got nobody telling me what I can and can't do.
Of course.
And I really love that, because this is a whole process of inquiry.
Sure.
Asking, well, what if this and what if that, and why not? And so I thought, well, imagine if something happens. Mm-hmm. And so I simply froze the water using my method, pulled it out. And for context of the image that I'm about to describe to you, I used to live in Japan a long time ago.
Okay.
And my mother and I would write letters to each other because we didn't have cell phones or computers at the time, which makes me sound prehistoric. But so much has happened in such a short period.
We're similar vintages. I'm not that prehistoric either, so we're okay. Don't worry.
Okay, we're good. And so we would write letters, and at the end of every letter, my mother would make an attempt at drawing a circle, and her circles were so bad they often looked like maps of Australia. And then there'd be like a little heart in the middle, and that was her signature sign-off. So I have this stack of letters that actually they were very private. No one didn't share them with anyone. And so it was something very personal to me. And in the ice was a misshapen circle with a heart in the middle, clear as day.
Stop it.
And I was like, oh my gosh. And then every year on her birthday, I ask the same question. Can you connect my mum to me? And there is a misshapen circle with a heart in the middle. And as they've gone on, her circles are actually getting better. But then people could say, well, now you're projecting because that's what you're expecting. So last year I asked a different question on Mum's birthday. I said, could you, to the water, connect Mum to both my sister and I? Because my sister Wendy also, of course, missed Mum. And I didn't actually know what would show up for that. And what showed up with 2 misshapen circles with hearts in the middle, one for each of us.
Wow.
And a really wild story is from my grandmother. So my grandmother, her name was Rivers. And she was very radical back then.
Rivers?
It sounds like that's my accent.
Okay, I was going to say Rivers. That would be awesome if her name was Rivers.
It would be. But Rivers.
Oh, Rivers. Got it.
And she was pretty radical back in the 40s, and she ditched my grandfather.
In the 40s? That's amazing.
And she remarried, and they caught a plane from England over to Miami. And from Miami, they caught a plane called the Star Ariel. They were going to their honeymoon to Barbados. But they never got there because the plane went down over the Bermuda Triangle.
Oh, wow.
And we don't know what happened. So it happened the day before my mother's 8th birthday. So I never met Revis, but I always was curious, like, what happened to her? What's going on in the Bermuda Triangle? Because if you Google the Star Ariel, you will see it's one of the confirmed planes that had absolutely no reason to go down or to go missing. Mm-hmm. And so somebody found like an article about that was written in England about how she was English and how it went down. It was kind of a big deal. And so I put my dish of water on top of the article with the question in my mind, like, what happened in the Bermuda Triangle? I had no idea what I would see. And the image was, essentially it looked just like a portal or a vortex. And the way in which ice forms, it was a very, very unusual design. And whenever I talk and I show people these images, there's always like oohs and ahs because of what it really looks like. And I need to extend that conversation a little further. But because I don't believe that water is stuck in time and space, because I've seen water show me things that happened in the past and also things that are about to happen. And
Stop it.
An example of hydromancy would be when I put my...
Hydromancy? Mm-hmm. What is hydromancy?
It's basically being able to tell the future in water.
So reading tea leaves, but reading water, essentially.
Well, you have to even look at that.
Yeah.
How do the tea leaves or the coffee get to be in those spaces through the water?
Of course.
So, but even if you look in the Greek times, the Oracle of Delphi was looking into the waters to tell the future.
That was before the crystal ball, if you will.
Even in ancient Egypt.
Sure, the water.
Statues.
The Mayans,
They
of
were all
course.
looking into the waters. Right. So
you're blowing my mind.
So this all connects from ancient times all the way to the now.
Sure.
But I had put my thumb into a petri dish of water, obviously removed it. Like I just try stuff, why not?
Sure.
Froze it. And so I got the clearest image of my thumb with even the little lines where the knuckle is and then the nail. And I thought that was really cool, but there was something interesting on the nail of the ice finger. Mm-hmm. There was a chip in the nail. And I chipped my nail in exactly the same place 3 hours later. And I'm like, what? And so when you start working in this field, and I mean, that is not the only time. There have been multiple cases where water has shown me things that are about to happen. Like another example would be I was simply invited water to share whatever it wants, and I do that a lot because I don't want to control this thing that I love as being wild. Because this is a relationship, and I'll come back to that. But one thing I hear all the time, and I know people don't mean this in any bad way, is this term, I'm going to program the water.
Okay.
Right? And I think, have we not programmed everything enough?
Right.
Have we not, can we stop with this just a minute? They mean it well because they think it's going to be programmed with love, with geometry, with all these different things, and therefore then it's going to heal them. But I have seen that water is fully aware of its surroundings and is reading your information, reading you. It knows all your secrets. It knows everything about you. We think this is a programming. Actually, a much better way to go about it would be to really say, I'm going into conversation with water. I am inviting water to share with me something for my greatest good rather than the control. And I'll give an example of how I approach this work. If you went into a petting zoo where you can, touch the deer and feed them or the bunny rabbits or the thing, whatever, and you go and you have a nice time and you go, oh, that was really fun, that was lovely, which animal did you like best, kind of a deal. And you compare that with going out to the forest, being one in the forest, and you might notice, for example, out of the corner of your eye, there is a deer looking at you.
Wild.
And you're like, oh, there's a deer looking at me. And then maybe it can approach you, and maybe you can even touch it, and you can have that connection with it, and then it runs off. And then it's like one of the most greatest moments because you have created an environment safe enough for it to enter into.
As opposed to something that's been controlled.
Yes. And then you go, and you could even then look at that. So I look at water this way. If I overthink everything, and I'm like, if I have an attachment to outcome,
done.
Water won't design with me in the way that it regularly does. So I have been guided with water to become quite neutral in this work, which has actually been very, very helpful piece, because too much attachment to outcome has a whole different energy to being just open. And when you cap it at what you think water should show you, then you limit what water could show you. If you are open, water can show you all of the complexities of so much more than you've even thought of, even down to all of the different musical genres. I had no idea what would happen, but water showed me, like even with the Enter Sandman, by Metallica.
It's a great song.
Right? So that's kind of a different genre. Yeah. And we got like this incredible kind of being with these kind of wing-like shapes, like the Sandman from the Sandman Chronicles, for example, like something like that. So like for Redemption Song, we got this huge tree from Bob Marley, you know that song?
Of course, that's a beautiful song.
I love that song. And this massive full tree, but it's on a cliff. So the symbolism is there. And then you can kind of look at all of these different things and you go into the symbolism. And so one of the other examples was where I was inviting water to share whatever it wanted. I got this obelisk shape. I'm like, wow, that's pretty cool. But I don't see anything around me that looks like an obelisk. So I'll just let that be for a bit. Because quite often what will happen is I might be showing water a picture, for example, but there might be some coasters nearby, or there might be something nearby, or some glasses, and water will show the image I'm showing it, but also what's in the background. It's showing you all the information. It's not just picking up on what I'm interested in. It's showing me that it's aware of its entire surroundings. So I see this obelisk, and I'm like, what's going on with this? And I just left it. And then a few hours later, a friend comes over, and she'd been to the crystal shop. And she says, oh my God, I really want to show this amazing crystal that I just bought. And she pulls it out, and it's this big obelisk-shaped crystal. And she said, have you seen anything like this before? And I'm like, well, actually, let me show you this picture. And so it was a really interesting piece.
I have to ask you, I mean, we started off the conversation more on a scientific standpoint of what water can do. We've now walked into the more esoteric aspect of it, which is more fascinating to me than even the science is fascinating. But the esoteric aspect of it is really fascinating to me. On the show, I've spoken to so many different people from different walks of life, spiritual teachers, psychics, mediums, channels, all this kind of stuff. So I'm always very inquisitive, like yourself.
Yeah.
I want to know how things work.
Yeah.
Even in the esoteric.
Yeah.
So I've really broken down, at least to my understanding, of how the other side communicates through a medium, communicates through a channel, what a psychic does, how they do their stuff. What do you think, who is sending this information to the water? Because with a psychic, there's some spirit guides, angels, 1,000 things that could be talking to you to help you along your path. But you're talking to water, so what is water conscious itself, or is it some other, a spirit guide or someone like talking through it for you? Like, what is your take on it? I know there's no definitive way to answer that question, but I'd love to hear your take on it.
Rather than water being conscious, it could be that water is consciousness.
Okay.
In which case there is no limit to what it can connect to or what energy it connect to. Mm-hmm. And so within that space, I think that what we have done very well is separate water from Everything. So we see water in a glass as totally separate to us. Although when we drink it, now it becomes us.
Right.
Water has been through the trees, it's been through the clouds, it's been through the earth, it's been through our ancestors.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
it's been through, all of these different things.
Right.
And it comes to us in a glass, and then we absorb all of that energy. So we could well be drinking the energy of our ancestors in one sip of water. And it's no coincidence that water finds you. We're lucky in the Western world to be able to have access to water that we can drink
anytime we want, right?
And yet, it still finds us, but we don't give credit for that. So when we're starting to talk about the other side, if you will, it is really a place where I don't think that, because water is not stuck in time and space, and if consciousness and water are that intimately intertwined, and also that if you actually look at this, our entire life, that we believe this is our life. I believe in my own experience that this is my life and you have your life, and that we're very attached to it. But how do we remember our life? We have to remember all the memories of it. We are a body full of memories. And where are they held? Are they stored within the waters of the body? And so if we actually have to remember to retell our life, what happened, what we saw, then we are, as water, remembering all of those things. And not just from that, how do we remember past lives? If water is not involved, water is a piece of every single piece of this entire story. And so when we start talking about being able to connect to spirit, it is really, to me, the easiest thing in the world. If you think that water could be the veil, it's just a mist. But the connection that we have is different states of water to water. It's like water is always in communication with itself. And I would say that it also explains intuition. For example, we all have electrical charge, which is not woo-woo. Read it by heart math.
Of course.
Okay, and if water is attracted to electrical charge, which I've also touched on, so we have water in the air, right? And that water in the air is attracted to electrical charge. We have electrical charge, meaning that we essentially have a liquid crystal antenna. So we can receive information from outside of ourselves, where water has picked up information and bringing it in. So if we meet someone, we don't even touch them, we get a feeling, oh, I really love this person. I feel like we've always known each other.
Yeah, you feel that energy,
Or we feel like we don't like each other very much, or
you repel.
Just kind of repel. That's based on the kind of patterns that your energetic frequency is making in this energy field around us. If it's a similar pattern to the person you like, you have a liking.
But without water, that's not possible.
Yeah.
Without the water, because we've talked about
on Earth anyway.
On Earth, on Earth, yes, on this plane plane of existence. When you meet somebody, you talk about the energy, you talk about the vibe, the frequency. I'm like, oh, I don't like her. After I talked to that person, I felt like I wanted to take a shower because I just felt dirty. Those kind of things. Without the water, you can't do any of this. No. So water is essentially a conduit for everything in your...
Absolutely everything.
Without this, for more than, 2 days, you die.
It could be a little longer for some people, because there are people that
have more hydration.
And they're bringing in the light, but the light has everything to do with water as well. There is no place where water really isn't. And it's just about what perspectives you're looking at as different states of water.
Right.
And I was kind of going somewhere a bit more with the intuitive part, because when you don't listen to your intuition, you always wish you had.
Yeah.
Like, I shouldn't probably go in the car today, and then something happens, and I should have listened to my intuition. Well, what is intuition? So is it that your electrical charge could well go further? And water isn't limited to time and space in the way that we think that we are, or some people do. And so it could be that it's already seen every potential outcome and is giving you the information as intuition, which is water speaking to water, water in a different state speaking to the intelligent water within you based off the electrical charge component. And so Water is telling you potential. So a really important piece of my work is where I've put a seed into water, say a sunflower seed, removed it and frozen. It didn't design the seed. It designed the outcome of the seed. It designed the sunflower. Same thing with the flax. A flax seed designed the pods of the flax where the seeds are held. So it's the fruit of the flax. And with an apple, and I've done this after cutting an apple, putting an apple seed in there, it designed an image of the apple. I've let that melt, refrozen it a couple of days later, and the apple's still there. Let that melt, done it a week later, and the apple is still there. And with biological fluids and with things that are things like seeds, the imprint lasts for so long. But there's in every even old little shriveled up seed, there's 10% water storing the potential, the known potential for its outcome. And I've worked a lot with eggs because I've always thought that ancestral information was shared through amniotic fluid, and that amniotic fluid, for example, must be one of the most naturally informed waters. And I can't go chasing pregnant women around hoping their waters are kind of like break. So it's like, yeah, I can. I have had some lovely volunteers, which I appreciate. But
that's an image.
It is really. Is that, well, what about, eggs? They're little containers of life, right?
Yeah.
And I work with the albumin. So when you carefully crack an egg open, just a little bit, before the gloopy gelatinous part and the yolk come out, there's a thin saliva-like part that comes out.
Yeah.
That's the albumin. And when you freeze that, I've identified 6 specific patterns that form in healthy, free-range, fresh eggs. With caged hen eggs, you only see 2 of those patterns form. And I did some work where it was really to see how one might affect the other. It was about transference of information. So I put a free-range egg next to a caged hen egg and I left them overnight. And I have worked with hundreds and hundreds of both. And they're very specific patterns. It's not about putting your consciousness in there. This is how they look. And I've done it with duck, quail, goose, and chicken eggs. And all of the patterns in the albumin are the same. And one of those patterns is very feathery, so I'm very curious about what I would do if I did it with snake eggs or reptile eggs. Would we see different consistent patterns in that albumin? But we don't have any of that in New Zealand, so I hope to do that one day.
Well, you're going to Miami, so you can get an alligator egg.
Well, you never know. When I put them side by side and left them overnight and did the controls, what I found was that the free-range egg stayed beautiful, had these very volcano patterns and the weaving and feathery patterns that we always see. But the caged hen egg had started to take on more complex patterns. And I thought that was really cool, and I put it on social media because it seemed like there was some kind of healing that had happened. And everyone said, that's cool, but what if you surround it by bagged eggs? It's definitely going to go bad. So I'm like, is that where we're at? Okay, let's try. So I did controls, and I got my free-range egg in the middle, and I surrounded by the same batch of caged hen eggs. And I left them all overnight. And there was healing by proximity, and I've done this multiple times with the same result. The free-range egg in the middle stayed absolutely beautiful, pristine, the same patterns as you'd always see. However, the eggs that were the closest, the caged hen eggs closest to the free-range egg, all had improved so much that they started to look just like free-range eggs. The ones furthest away improved, but not quite as much. I'm going to do one where we have a free-range egg in the middle of 100 caged eggs at some point. But what we are seeing is so fascinating because none of those eggs were fertilized, right? Which means that information exchange still happened from the free-range to the caged hen egg, suggesting that, the information was for potential was always there, which kind of you have that, what came first, chicken or the egg? I think it was the waters that came first. And so it makes no sense that in this very primordial stage, nature would prefer things to go worse. If they can be improved, that would make more sense. When you look at the runt of the litter doesn't do well and nature wants strong things. So we're looking at all of this, but the takeaway, again, by molecular count, not by volume, we're 99% water, is that if we just start to heal ourselves, we start to heal our environment and those around us.
And it's fascinating because when you were saying that, with the egg in the middle, affecting the eggs around it. That happens to us when you meet someone who, and I've had the blessings of doing this, is meeting spiritually enlightened people.
Yeah.
And when you meet with them, there's some energies that you just go, my God, I just feel better being around them, or I can like literally sense it. And it's like, and you hear the stories of the masters, you know, yogis sitting around and people being intoxicated by their energy field. There are other examples of what you're talking about within this reality. So it's fascinating and fascinating. Veda, I could keep talking to you about water. I can't believe that I've spoken this long about water, and I am fascinated and want to continue to speak about water.
Well, that's good news.
It's no, I mean, like when you sit down, like we're going to talk about water, and everyone's like, oh God, water. But this has been such a fascinating conversation, especially when I started getting into the esoteric, because it's just a fascinating idea of what water means spiritually to us. And not only spiritually, but what it means to our life. We take it such for granted, especially in the West. We take clean water for granted. But and not to get graphic, but when I was in Europe, I was eating a lot of cheese in Italy.
Yeah.
Lots of cheese, gelato. I'm like, I am never going to go to the bathroom again. I mean, I was like, there's just so much cheese, which I never ate, but it was so good, and so much pizza, and it was just so. I'm like, I'm never ever going to go to the bathroom again.
Yeah.
But I was drinking their mineral water. I mean, a lot of it, like probably gallons of it a day, because we were walking 15, 20,000 steps a day.
Wow, yeah.
Like walking about 5 or 10 miles a day, just walking around, doing the tourist thing. And I remember we would just drink just obscene amounts of this Italian mineral water it's everywhere. Everyone, it's bottled water. But I never once had a problem going to the bathroom.
Yeah.
And I was fascinated. I'm like, is it the cheese? Is it the water? Is it a combination of both, of how the quality of the food is over there? And I'm sure in New Zealand, similar. It's very different than here in the States. But water that was my first kind of indication of like, oh, the kind of water I'm drinking really does
make a difference.
Makes a huge difference.
Yeah, there's the quality. It's more about quality over quantity.
Right.
As well. But I love this. To be honest, my favorite areas to follow and study with water are more esoteric. Yeah. I love to be able to weave science, art, and consciousness together, because then you get a really well-rounded view. And I also think this work is so important that it's important that people understand that they can do this too, that some pretty incredible, amazing things are happening, and that there might just be more to water than it just being a drink. Even tears and urine, like I've done lots of studies on bodily fluids as well. And tears in our greatest grief and our joy, those times where we cry emotional tears. Sure. The tears come out of our eye ducts and come around our cheeks back towards our mouths, because they have been reordered and restructured to help heal our hearts or expand them even further.
Interesting.
And we are our own medicine. You can just go pee in a dish and also see what's going on inside of you using my freezing method. And because it's just so simple, it's like you can start to even identify for women, when are you fertile? Like what's going on in your different phases. For men, you can see what's going on for all kinds of things. And it gives you an indicator of where you're at. You can see beautiful hexagons in someone that's been doing a water fast. You can see where you might need to, move along, because there's hydroglyphs for salts, for example. And you can see someone who's had a lot of salt. You can see it in the urine. You see it in the water.
Fascinating.
There's so much to go into.
It's a lifetime. It's a lifetime of study.
It is.
Now I'm going to ask you a few questions. I ask all my guests. What is your definition of living a fulfilled life?
Loving fully, finding your purpose, and life should be simple. I think if you be an honest, good person, be kind, treat people the way you'd like to be treated. Find purpose in your life, even if that purpose is to actually find purpose. The quest is still there. It's not that you're without purpose because you don't know what your purpose is.
Sure.
Looking for what is bigger than you that you can also get up for in the day when you don't feel like getting up, but there's something bigger than you to get up for. That could be being a parent. That could be, a
podcast.
A podcast. It could be anything.
Yeah, sure.
But where you know you're making a difference in the world, where you want to leave the world a better place.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
If you had a chance to go back in time and speak to little Veda, what advice would you give her?
That's a vulnerable one. Because little me went through a hell of a lot of stuff. That you're safe,
Mm-hmm.
that you are loved, that you're beautiful, inside and out, and that you're going to make a big difference in the world.
What advice would little you give you?
Little me would remind me to have fun.
Don't take it so seriously.
Yeah.
How do you define God or source?
I think God and source, like everything and nothing. And that the closer and more you love yourself without ego or expectation or any of those things, it's like a stream you start to go down that is taking you to source. Mm-hmm. And that God, creator, is not necessarily what many people think it is. It is not just love, because I think there's more to that. For me, anyway, creator is what creates the pieces within me that I will never forget, the pieces in me that make a difference and have learnt and experienced love and dreams and this world in a way that is unique.
Okay. What is love?
I don't think you can really love somebody until you really love yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And what is love? The more I've started to see myself from the perspective of water,
Mm-hmm.
the more I start to realize that water is a mirror to the divine. And love is also a mirror to the divine.
Now, where can people find out more about you and the amazing work you're doing in the world?
My website, my name, VedaAustin.com, not very original. On Instagram, I post all the time, so it's Veda Austin _water.
And you have a new book.
Yes, it's called The Living Language of Water, but we don't have it on Amazon, so you have to go to my website to get it. Mm-hmm. So those are all the places. I also have a Facebook page, which is Veda Austin Researcher. What is it? Veda Austin.
It's all on your website. All the links are on the website. Veda Austin.
Yeah.
And do you have any parting messages for the audience?
Well, I would just say that, like I've mentioned, water is always going down lots of tributaries. It's all going back to source. We are all on our own journeys going back to source. Water is the mirror of the divine, and that mirror is also reflected within us in all of the molecules of our body, and that water is not in judgment. So if you stuff up, don't worry, we can get back on track. There is no this beautiful thing we call water loves you no matter what. And that always has made me feel good.
Man, it has been such a pleasure and honor speaking to you today. I like I said before, I never thought I could speak this long about water and be fascinated by it. But thank you so much for not only being on the show, but for the amazing work you're doing to help awaken this planet. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks for watching. Click on one of the videos below to continue your journey, and don't forget to subscribe.